Join us on an exciting journey to discover the hidden genetic history deep within Scotland. On this journey, we will explore the waves of migration and remarkable settlements that have shaped the DNA identity of the Scottish people over millennia. It all began about 12,000 years ago when the first hunter-gatherer communities set foot on this land. Over thousands of years of history, successive waves of migration arrived in Scotland, bringing different bloodlines and cultures. Modern genetic studies have revealed countless surprising and fascinating kinship ties. For instance, have you ever heard that a portion of the Scottish population actually carries blood from ancient Siberian tribes? Or that there is a strange and unexpected genetic connection between the Scottish and the distant region of North Africa? So now, let's kick off this genetic adventure across Scotland. Our journey begins about 12,000 years ago, when the massive glaciers of the last ice age retreated from this land. The first inhabitants to set foot in Scotland were hunter-gatherers of the Middle Stone Age, also known as the Mesolithic. These nomadic groups followed the retreating ice sheets, establishing the earliest human presence in what is now Scotland. Although the genetic contribution they left to modern Scots is not huge, their DNA marks still quietly persist in the blood of the indigenous population. A great revolution occurred about 6,000 years ago, when the farmers of the Neolithic period appeared. This migration wave originated from the Near East and Anatolia, bringing advanced agricultural knowledge and new technology to Scotland. These Neolithic farmers left a profoundly significant genetic impact on the native population. Their legacy can be admired through impressive architectural structures such as the Callanish stones on the Isle of Lewis or the majestic Ring of Brodgar in Orkney. About 4,500 years ago, another major migration occurred with the arrival of the Bell Beaker culture, named after their distinctive bell-shaped pottery vessels. These Bell Beaker migrants had a very powerful influence on the gene pool of the entire British population. Recent studies estimate that the Bell Beaker migrants may have replaced up to 90% of the genetic ancestry of the local Neolithic inhabitants, including the Scottish population. When the Bronze Age began about 4,000 years ago, it witnessed even deeper transformations in both genetics and culture. This period was marked by the emergence and spread of Celtic languages, a key factor in the history of the land. Originating from Central Europe, the Celts formed diverse and rich tribal communities, yet they shared a common foundation in language, spiritual beliefs, and distinctive cultural customs. In present-day Scotland, Celtic culture was gradually absorbed and integrated over many generations, bringing with it remarkable advances in metalworking technology, new social organization models, and distinct religious practices. This process of acculturation was uneven across the territory, as coastal areas and lowlands were influenced and transformed early, before changes reached the majestic highlands and remote islands. The strong imprint of the Celts is most clearly demonstrated by the development and expansion of Gaelic, especially in the western highlands of Scotland. The Pictish language, believed to be part of the Brythonic Celtic group, continued to survive in eastern Scotland until as late as the 10th century AD. This historical period witnessed the emergence of sturdy hill forts, the flourishing of innovative artistic schools, and profound changes in the burial rites of the indigenous people. Modern genetic research has revealed an interesting fact. The indigenous populations actively adopted and integrated Celtic customs, rather than being completely replaced by a new ethnic group. That solid Celtic cultural foundation continuously evolved and strongly intersected with later waves of influence from the Roman Empire, the Anglo-Saxon tribes, the Norse, and finally the Normans, all weaving together a remarkably diverse and rich Scottish cultural heritage. The Iron Age in Scotland, dating back about 2,800 years, is often closely associated by historians with the emergence and dominance of the enigmatic Picts. The Picts were essentially a confederation of many tribes, and it was the Romans who gave them the name Picti, meaning painted people or tattooed people. Genetic analyses have revealed that the Picts were not genetically very different from other Iron Age populations living in other parts of Britain. It is likely that their genetic heritage quietly spread and covered most of Scotland, with particularly strong traces in the northeastern part of the country. The Roman rule period, lasting from AD 43 to AD 410, generally left only a modest and limited genetic imprint on Scottish territory. Although they never fully conquered Scotland, the Roman army did establish a presence in the area south of the majestic Antonine Wall. Recent surveys have uncovered pieces of evidence of Mediterranean DNA in Scotland, mainly concentrated in the southern regions of the country. However, it should be emphasized that the genetic contribution from the Romans is still quite small compared to other, much larger historical migration waves. After the fall of the mighty Roman Empire, British history entered a new chapter. The Anglo-Saxon period, a phase lasting from the 5th century until the 11th century AD. The majority of the Anglo-Saxons chose to settle and make a living in lands that belonged to present-day England. However, their influence extended beyond the borders of England to spread into parts of southern Scotland, most notably the fertile region of Lothian. Finally, we arrive at the Viking Age spanning from 793 to 1066, a historical period that profoundly impacted and deeply altered the entire genetic landscape of Scotland. The imprints from the Norse people remain vivid and indelible in the DNA of the Scottish, most prominently in the Northern Isles. According to scientific research results, about 25% of DNA in Orkney and 20 to 25% of DNA in Shetland can be traced back to Norway. Not only in the islands, genetic traces from the Norse also appear across mainland Scotland, though at a more modest rate, averaging only about 4%. Although the Norman conquest of 1066 primarily affected England, it also left undeniable marks on Scotland. Many Norman nobles were granted extensive lands in Scotland, especially under the reign of King David I. The genetic contribution from the Normans is most evident among the Scottish nobility, where this lineage remains prominent. During the 12th and 13th centuries, a large wave of Flemish immigrants arrived in Scotland, invited by Scottish kings, particularly King David I. These skilled merchants and craftsmen chose to settle in various regions of Scotland, thereby enriching its genetic diversity. The impact of the Irish on Scotland's genetic makeup did not occur in a single wave, but through multiple migration waves throughout history. The Gaelic kingdom of Dal Riata once existed and expanded across lands in Ulster and western Scotland during the 5th and 6th centuries. This was the earliest period, marking strong and significant interaction between populations. Later, throughout the 19th century, a massive wave of Irish people poured into Scotland amid the Industrial Revolution. Now, let us explore the fascinating findings from modern genetic research. The Scotland DNA Project, led by geneticist Dr. Jim Wilson from the University of Edinburgh, has provided remarkably fresh and unprecedented insights into Scotland's genetic heritage. This project analyzed DNA samples from nearly 1,000 Scottish people, revealing previously unknown information about their genetic origins. A landmark study of theirs in 2019 divided Scotland into 6 distinct genetic clusters: Borders, Southwest, and Hebrides. The remaining clusters include the Northeast region, Orkney, and Shetland. The study provided a nuanced and profound perspective on Scotland's genetic landscape, going beyond simple generalizations to reveal complex ancestral patterns distinct to each region. On a broader scale, this study confirms a fundamental division in Scottish genetics, notably the clear distinctiveness of the Northeast region. In the southwestern region, the dividing boundary runs almost along the course of the famous River Forth. What makes this boundary particularly interesting is that it almost exactly reflects the historical lands once belonging to Scotland's 2 main ancient peoples, the Gaels and the Picts. This genetic evidence acts like a fascinating seasoning, enriching our understanding of the early period of Scottish history. It reveals that those cultural and political boundaries may have left marks lasting for centuries, deeply embedded in the genetic makeup of the Scottish people. Among the most surprising discoveries is that the genetic group of the Isle of Man has a close relationship with individuals from southwestern Scotland. This intriguing connection has shed light on the complex interweaving of geography, historical currents, and genetic characteristics in shaping populations. Furthermore, the study also indicates that the Hebrides Archipelago, a chain of islands off the west coast of Scotland, possesses a completely distinct genetic identity compared to the rest of the mainland. Figuratively speaking, the Hebrides are like a true genetic island, where a relatively isolated population has gradually developed its own distinctive genetic signals over time. Going back to an earlier study, the 2012 research led by the University of Edinburgh caused a stir with its surprising conclusions. The key finding of this study was that about 1% of the current Scottish population can claim direct descent from people of the Berber or Tuareg tribes from the Sahara. This special lineage is about 5,600 years old, revealing ancient trade networks that once connected distant North Africa with Scotland. Dr. Wilson further explained that this DNA signature from the Sahara would have spread along with the Moorish conquest as far as the Iberian Peninsula. From there, it quietly traveled along the Atlantic coast, passing through France before arriving in Scotland. Moreover, genetic surveys have also found the presence of DNA markers of Siberian origin in the Scottish population. Notably, these markers are prominently present in the Orkney Islands, and scientists believe this genetic link originated from migrations that took place around 5,000 years ago. We are talking about specific genetic markers associated with the Yamnaya culture, a culture that thrived in the Pontic-Caspian steppe in present-day Ukraine and southern Russia. These Siberian origin genetic markers appear more frequently in the Orkney population, as well as in some mainland areas of Scotland, compared to the rest of Britain. Although detectable, this genetic influence remains relatively modest overall, reflecting a limited interaction between populations of Siberian origin and the ancient inhabitants of Scotland. In the same study, scientists delved into the genetics of Scottish surnames, and they devoted particular attention to the famous Stuart clan. Interestingly, they found that up to 15% of participants with the surname Stuart are actually direct descendants of the Scottish royal lineage. In addition, they possess what scientists call the royal bloodline DNA. The most fascinating discoveries from genetic research often revolve around specific individuals or groups. For instance, the Scotland DNA Project found that actor Tom Conte has a genetic link to Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. Both inherited genes from the same Saracen ancestor who settled in Italy around the 10th century. Later, a descendant named Giovanni Bonaparte migrated to the island of Corsica and founded the family line from which Napoleon was born. The project also identified distinctive genetic markers of the Magyar Thai tribe, a people thought to have vanished. This tribe had its historical homeland around the Stirling area, having faced Roman legions in 208 AD. That name appeared in historical records until the 8th century, and people once believed it had completely disappeared. However, through DNA analysis, scientists discovered a high concentration of a specific genetic marker concentrated around the Stirling area and the Ochil Hills. This very place was the homeland of the mighty Magyar Thai tribe of old. Scottish surnames are like a vibrant tapestry, where each thread represents a different cultural influence that together shaped this country over centuries. Those names tell a captivating story of invasions, migrations, and cultural blending, all creating a truly unique Scotland. First, let's talk about Norman influence. After the Norman conquest, surnames like Bruce, Fraser, and Stuart became prevalent in Scotland, and each of these names often holds a fascinating origin story. For example, Bruce comes from de Bruce, a family originating from Brix in Normandy, while Fraser may derive from the French word fraise, meaning strawberry, that is to say, Fraser. However, long before the Normans arrived, Scotland possessed a rich Celtic heritage, clearly reflected in Gaelic names. Surely you have heard of names beginning with Mac or Mac. This prefix means son of, so MacDonald means son of Donald, and MacGregor means son of Gregory. Interestingly, the surname Campbell comes from Gaelic, meaning crooked mouth. The Vikings also left a deep mark. Surnames like Maciver, Gunn, and Sutherland all have origins in Scandinavia. In fact, the name Sutherland means southern land, but this perspective comes from the Vikings when they looked south from the distant land of Norway. The strong presence and influence of the Anglo-Saxons left their mark through common surnames like Armstrong and Douglas. Interestingly, most of these surnames are often descriptive, reflecting some characteristic of the person who bore them. For example, the name Armstrong likely refers to a person with very strong and powerful arms. However, we cannot forget the Picts, the ancient inhabitants who once lived on the land of Scotland. Many famous surnames like Forbes, Ross, and Keith are believed by researchers to originate from the Picts, often closely tied to ancient territories of old. Besides that, Scotland also has a very close connection with Ireland, reflected in surnames like Boyle, Doherty, and Kennedy. A characteristic of these surnames is that they often have the prefix O, meaning descendant of, For example, O'Neill means descendant of Neil. Scottish surnames also reveal much about the occupations of ancestors, such as MacIntyre originally meaning son of a skilled carpenter. Not only that, surnames can also indicate their place of residence, like Dunbar, meaning a fortress standing on a headland. Even sometimes surnames describe distinctive physical features, like Campbell meaning a person with a crooked mouth. The genetic history of Scotland is truly an incredibly complex tapestry, influenced by countless different streams of influence, spanning from ancient migrations to modern historical events. Each new research study helps us understand more deeply the forces and factors that have helped shape the Scottish people over thousands of years of history. So, what do you think about these fascinating discoveries? Feel free to share your personal views in the comments section below. If you found this journey into Scottish genetic discovery truly captivating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to not miss out on exciting upcoming content. Don't hesitate to check out our videos on Irish DNA and Spanish DNA to gain more fascinating genetic knowledge. Sincerely, thank you for joining us on this wonderful genetic exploration adventure today.